Mini Test 22. You'll hear a part of a lecture given by an economist about dwindling oil supplies. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello, everybody. I hope everyone enjoyed the refreshments. And now I'd like to present Dr. Geraldo Javier from the London School of Economics, who will give a brief talk about global energy issues. Dr. Javier.
Thank you. Those drinks were great, and thank you to your organization that invited me here. Tonight, I will be talking about an issue that has made many headlines recently. I'm not talking about some destructive apocalypse or about the end of the world or anything like that. But when I talk about peak oil, I am referring to a set of circumstances that will change the way our children and everyone after that will live in the world. For now, let's imagine a new oil field that has recently been discovered. Before that, geologists studied the area and determined that it had potential for holding oil. Later, surveys and test drillings showed that there was, indeed, oil underneath the ground there. Now, it will take time to raise money, to hire laborers, and to construct oil rigs. Production of oil will start with maybe 1 or 2 rigs, and will later expand. Now, imagine a graph of the oil produced by this field over a long time period. The number of barrels produced per day will rise at a steady rate over time, but at some point will peak. On the graph, this could be visualized as a kind of bell curve, where the numbers of barrels of oil produced per day will slowly decrease over time. It is important to note that oil production from this field will not stop immediately. The graph only shows that as oil is extracted from this field, it becomes harder and harder to keep production growing. There comes a point where the growth stops and starts to reverse. Oil is a finite resource, and someday the rate at which oil is taken from the ground will start decreasing. That fact is undeniable. More than 80 million barrels of oil per day are produced. That figure has been growing continuously over the past century, but if we look at individual countries, we can clearly see peak oil effects. In the earlier part of the 20th century, the United States of America used to be the largest producer of oil in the world. Eventually, other countries overtook the US in oil production. By 1971, the extraction of oil in the US peaked. Now, there's much less oil production in states like Texas and California. The point is that it is harder to extract oil at the same rate from existing fields, and that it is increasingly expensive to find and exploit new sources. There is still much debate going on about the consequences of peak oil. Some have predicted that the peak of oil production in the world has already passed and thus advocate for huge changes in the way we live. Others set a date farther into the future. Nonetheless, they acknowledge that economic growth in developing countries like China and India will increase demand and make the oil crunch worse. Many solutions to mitigate the eventual pain of decreased oil production have been proposed. Even the best ones will still require much planning. Biofuels, though promising, are not a good way to reduce the consumption of oil. Diverting food crops to fuel production seems to raise the price of food in general, which is not good for anybody. Focusing on local economic production might be good in some cases, but sometimes it is also necessary to trade with faraway locals. It seems the best thing to do is to keep consumption as local as possible, while acknowledging that trade with faraway nations is sometimes required. Also, countries must start making sure that transportation and energy production become as independent as possible from oil and hydrocarbon resources. Since those sectors use the most oil in the world, such a move would be incredibly beneficial for the world economy.